everyone, I'm Kara O'Donnell, Director of Communications and Community Engagement for Reston Association, and we've been hearing from some of you with questions about PRC's zoning initiative and what it means for all of you. So we thought we'd break it down a little bit for you. So today I am here with Mac Cummins, who is RA's CEO, and Natalie Serio, who is RA's land use planner. So Mac, let me start with you. What is PRC?
So thanks, Kara. PRC is actually a zoning district within the Fairfax County zoning ordinance, and a lot of people hear the term zoning, and zoning typically refers to an area of the county that might be office or an area of the county that might be residential. PRC actually stands for Planned Residential Community, and it was a zoning ordinance that was set up specifically for Reston in the early 1960s. And that's important because we wanted to have different kinds of design and a different kind of land use mix than had ever been done in the history of Fairfax County. So if you think of Lake Anne, when there's vertical mixed use with residential on top of commercial, that's just not something that had ever happened. So the county needed to create a brand new zoning ordinance at the time. So the Planned Residential Community Ordinance allows for tremendous flexibility in how those land uses and development will occur. But the ordinance itself hasn't been updated in quite some time. So the structure of the ordinance is multi-tiered and starts at a very high level with what are called development plans and are now called PRC plans, and I know we'll get into that in a minute, but then structures all the way down to very technical details around building and safety and utility placement and so forth. And because the county hasn't updated the PRC ordinance in quite some time, Reston Association asked them to update that ordinance to try to streamline and expedite and really make more efficient for the county permitting procedures is really the ultimate objective.
Now, you mentioned the PRC plan. Who really needs that PRC plan?
Excellent question. Everyone needs a PRC plan. But because the ordinance is fairly old, there are a number of other nomenclature like development plans or site plans or things that were approved in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In the early 2000s, the county updated the ordinance to call things a PRC plan. A PRC plan references what are your allowed land uses, how much density you have, distribution of where things are actually built, access points, and so forth. And so there is a requirement to have a PRC plan. And so as a result, when you have a PRC plan, the question becomes, how do you amend the PRC plan if you want to do something different? And that, of course, significantly affects the Reston Association because we are probably the biggest property owner within the PRC ordinance. So every development in Reston area is within the PRC itself, but we're the biggest landowner. So we have the most concern about why this is going to affect us.
Sure. And Natalie, let me turn to you. Why does RA want the county to consider these changes to the PRC ordinance?
So in a nutshell, it's because right now the PRC plan process is the same for both large modifications to a site and small. So for example, if we wanted to redo the entirety of Lake Anne, we would need a PRC plan. But also if we wanted to add additional square footage onto a small bathroom at one of our pool houses, we would also need a PRC plan. So by updating the minor modifications and exemptions policy for PRC plans, we would be streamlining our process. And we asked for an expanded list of exceptions to PRC plans.
Because those can just be handled administratively. You don't need the full plan, correct?
Right.
Okay, and Mac, let me turn back to you with why does all of this matter to RA's members?
So the reason to track this particular initiative is there are substantial cost differences in permitting and in creating impact studies, depending on whether or not something requires a PRC plan or is handled through the minor modification process. So for example, if we were going to add a completely brand new Lake Newport pool, that creates impacts in the community, which really do need to be evaluated. Extra traffic, extra noise, all sorts of different things. But if we're going to expand the Browns Chapel concession stand by 300 square feet, there really aren't those kinds of impacts. So clarifying the ambiguity in the ordinance and making sure things like if we want to expand the Browns Chapel concession stand, that's handled through an administrative process is actually of significant value to the members. And in our work with Fairfax County, they've agreed that it will also help them in streamlining their efficiency in terms of what is going through a legislative process and what is handled administratively. So really it has some financial impacts to us as it relates to our capital improvement program in the form of saved monies around permitting and entitlements with Fairfax County.
Okay, thank you both very much for joining us. And that brings us to the end. Of course, as mentioned, we will be providing all of our members important updates on this initiative, which you can always find by going to our website at reston.org. Thanks for joining us.